moving track a little bit, and it's kind of been quite topical, I would say, over the last couple of months, where there's been quite a bit of publicity around the menstrual cycle. Guy, I know you've done some kind of research in that area. In 2016, Georgie Broomvels and her group kind of put that kind of short research paper out there, like, where is the research around the female athlete and the menstrual cycle? So, Guy, I'm just kind of keen to hear about your research, and then specifically in terms of the menstrual cycle, like, if as practitioners we should consider change and training based on symptoms experienced in the menstrual cycle, and kind of your take and thoughts on that.
It's a very novel area, if you want to put it like that, and a lot of the research, sadly, without being horrible, it was done quite poorly around not controlling methods. But when we talk about the menstrual cycle, I think it's a good platform now, because we can be clear that a menstrual cycle is something that it doesn't use a hormonal contraceptive. So already, we have a lot of questions around menstrual cycles, but typically 50% of the athletes will use a hormonal contraceptive. So please ensure that all the advice that was potentially out there, you don't apply to them. But overall, the often question is, should you train around the menstrual cycle? And right now, there's insufficient evidence to say that, oh yeah, this is the time to train aerobically, or this is the time to do strength training. It just doesn't really happen. But if a player, for example, was experiencing like symptoms, so they came into the gym and they said, I've got really bad back pain, they're due their period, or they've got menstrual cramps and stuff like that, and they want to change the exercises, I'm more than happy to do that. But to systematically change a plan based upon somebody's menstrual cycle, I think is incorrect. And I think as well, most of us are team-based sports here, trying to manage when to train around the menstrual cycle for a group of athletes.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people think that, the girls will just naturally fall in sync, and that just doesn't happen. So trying to have a different program for every day, and ensuring that they all ovulate and all the hormones in the right place, I think it's not realistic yet anyway. And as well, there tends to be a massive variation in women from month to month. So, your cycle might be, for example, 32 days one month, but then it might go to 50 the month afterwards, or the next cycle, and you've put in together this plan that ultimately is a bit pointless and probably a bit ill-advised. From my real perspective, I think individual sports, so obviously we're not just all football, but from an individual point of view, if you've got the time and the resources, I think it is worth looking at. But again, it's a very individual thing. There's no point I wouldn't tell my athlete of today is you're running, because this is the best window to do it. I don't think it works like that. And I think I have just taken everything with a pinch of salt, and just being flexible is really important around menstrual cycle and training.
Yeah. I feel like I was similar, where, obviously I'm a female, so I've kind of experienced it and been through and go through kind of menstrual cycles. So you kind of go through that. My family, not myself, would tell me I had quite bad mood changes. And then, you experience kind of the cramps and some of that side of things. And, I think I always had an appreciation and understanding of menstrual cycle, but I was always a bit like what you just said there, like, you work with 20-25 like players. How on earth do you individualize? How on earth do you plan for each individual player? And so kind of what we started doing with the US team was, in the wellness app, we literally just had them input the start date of their menstrual cycle. So then at least we could start tracking, like you said, like, what was the duration of a menstrual cycle. And then kind of probably 8 months out from the World Cup, kind of just started noticing, and this was purely subjective, some correlations between kind of fatigue, soreness, sleep, and it was kind of for 2 players who were key players at the time, and it was always kind of round about the day before they would then start the menstrual cycle. And I think for me, it was then at that stage, like, okay, if they're struggling to sleep or not recovering as well, or getting like soreness in a particular muscle site, like, okay, we do need to address that going into a World Cup tournament like 6-8 months away. So that was for me almost like the turn on stage, like, yeah, we do need to do some kind of intervention. And we kind of then attacked it from a you know, kind of a new Georgian, kind of attacked it from an education piece, and then had the players start to then track their symptoms, and then filled in a more in-depth survey around some of the symptoms that they did experience, and then literally approached it from a symptom management. So, you know, it was kind of through diet, through recovery, through sleep strategies. Can we try and minimize the impact of the symptoms? And if I'm honest, some of the, you know, kind of some of the nutrition advice is anti-inflammatory foods, which actually for an elite athlete is something you should be doing anyway.
Oh, their diet, that's the problem, isn't
yeah.
it?
And then some of it around sleep is actually just good sleep hygiene that an athlete should be doing anyway. And actually for the US team, it was actually a good like checklist process of actually we can still improve diets here, or some of the, what you just said, like the other 22 hours, the stuff away from the pitch, from the training, and actually that'll have an impact potentially in reducing the symptoms, but then also the impact of those symptoms on performance. So that was kind of the way we kind of went about doing it, and then just kind of just keeping on top of the players and just really having visuals about good habits, good nutrition.
I think that's key. I think ultimately, you know, obviously when I first started, I knew very little, but you know, the actual understanding knowledge of female athletes around the menstrual cycle was generally quite poor. And I feel like I agree with you. If we educate the athletes to maybe self-manage or deal with their symptoms, and that way it can potentially take the burden off the sport. And if we give them the tools to manage symptoms or advice, I feel like that's a much better approach than going from the top-down approach. Using, you know, whereas we dictate. I do think what the most important thing is just around ensuring that they actually have a proper measure. And I feel like there's much bigger performance gains around health and stuff like that, just ensuring that they are actually regular rather than trying to pursue.